exchange $5.
What did I do?
For,
Are we live?
some people just
We're live.
You should?
Yep, we're live.
Then that's probably clear, right?
That works. I wouldn't have to count it because I think my mom.
You good?
Okay.
My dog has him like in
We're
little.
live.
If Chris was smart though, he'd be like, hey dude, give me $4.95 or something. You know what I mean? He'd do something stupid like that.
Who the heck pays me for the show? Like, it's just us messing with our kid.
Dude, I almost paid a fee in coins because I was just so mad about the fee. I
Just
almost
bring
walked
it
out and went
the
like,
giant
here's your
bag.
17, whatever, right here. Count that.
See, there was actually somebody did that. Like they were paying a bunch of speeding tickets, or not speeding. It was like a toll tickets, and they brought in a giant bag full of pennies. It came out
That would
like,
take so much time though. Like,
but it was like, I think the amount for of tickets it was up to like $200. So it's $200 worth of pennies.
Oh my God.
dude, imagine being all the guys that come behind him. The toll's already paid for, guys. The toll's covered.
Right.
Nice
So you
individual in
did
front of me.
Clicker, get the clicker.
Oh,
I couldn't see it for a second because of the light.
So we have.
Oh, Converge started. Hey, we should watch Converge.
Okay.
Instead of me
have-
preaching, we can have Converge preach.
Shut up. We have His Mercy is More. This is a new song. There's a Fountain. It's a hymn, but I really like it. And then Grace Alone. And so those are things you're having to scroll through to find.
First one is There's the Fountain. Got it.
No.
The first one I'm looking for is
Mercy.
Mercy is
Okay.
More.
Okay. Yes, that's what you're going for.
Because you can find His Mercy is More and starting there.
Here we go.
There is a fountain after this one, and then Grace Alone.
I forget how.
So there's stupid horses in my way.
The horses in the back.
well, it's in my way too, so like. Put it outside. Put it outside.
Nick, we're live. We're live, Nick.
He can't see me on
Just
that.
swear on it like Eston. Pretend it's a thing.
Okay, stop.
What? It's just a horse.
Oh dang it! I forgot to hit.
If it was alive, we could actually hit it.
We're live.
Nick,
No,
move.
we're
Let's
live.
try to
On
ride.
camera, kicking long.
Oh, it's on camera.
It's
Yes!
just on camera.
Oh, it just is. It really is.
Okay.
It's that SpongeBob episode where he tries to find
Here we go. Are we ready? Okay.
Yeah, we're ready. We're ready.
Okay, His mercy is more.
Lost foot on
Here we
me.
go.
Mercy's
You watch that?
It's more than
As we
your
take a
face.
horse.
Yes, we can
Real
horse.
life, people. Real life.
Giving him mercy.
You should
I
just
thought the
do a
saddest
story
thing
about
yesterday.
the donkey.
What is it?
Yes.
Is that it?
And they turn
Crap.
the sponges.
This is live, people. This is live.
Tear to a heart. I was like, oh.
Why is it?
Is it ready?
Yeah. It's going.
Oh.
Crap. Now the rest of
Did you want
Here's my Bible back in my room. Oh, no, it's right here. Oh, I just pressed the button.
Oh.
riches of kindness he lavished on us. His blood was the payment, his life was the cost. We stood neath the day we could never afford.
Oh, nope.
Our sins, they are many, his mercy is more. So much his mercy is our sins, they are his mercy is his mercy is more.
This is probably my favorite hymn of all time. This is by Mercy.
Mercy Me?
The one, the song is playing right now.
By Mercy Me?
Yes.
And there is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunged beneath that flood lose all their guilty stains. Lose all their guilty stains.
Alright. You're up, Nick.
Get on your high horse.
I was gonna sing that.
That's a pretty good one. Oh, I'm gonna sing?
Ooh.
No, I'm not singing, bro.
Nice.
You guys wouldn't want to hear me sing.
Please, dude.
Huh?
Please. Block.
Try me.
I could sit on my horse. I used to speak from the horse. But I don't know about
pictures of that.
Oh, you do?
From last year.
Maybe you can take a picture today.
Clayton has one on the horse too.
That's right.
You spoke on the horse?
I just spoke.
When?
I think he's trying
You were
to.
gone.
Aw.
You were not there.
I've only been
There's a
consistent
picture
as like
somewhere. It
recently.
might be on the Instagram page.
I think it's on this too. I don't know. I know it is on. I think it is on the Instagram page.
Is it? Okay.
It's easier to speak when you're sitting, I feel like.
You're right. You're more comfortable.
But also, like, I want to be facing you guys, not like.
Just there you go. He's eating your Bible. There you go.
Eating the word. You cannot live by bread alone, but by the word of God.
Amen.
Right. Freaking horse knew it. Where? Let me see.
Oh, sorry. That was October.
Wow.
Dang.
That was last year.
The horse has been gone too long.
I
It's like that last year
know.
was so far away. Like we only been through like a couple months.
I know, it really does feel like that, though.
October was 5 months ago.
We're almost.
5 months?
Yeah, but last year
We're
was only
almost
like
in month 3 of 2020.
Yeah, I know.
Dang. You guys make me feel old.
The fact that you're
Nick,
not-
Yeah, even though I'm the youngest one in here. I know. Alright, let's pray. And then we'll get on to this. Alright. Jesus, I thank you so much that I get to speak today, Lord, before my friends, before an anonymous audience. Lord, I pray that you speak through me and that I'd be glorifying you with my words, Jesus. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Alright, so if you guys want, you guys can open up to Philippians 1, verse 12. So that's what I'm going to be speaking out of today. But I want to tell you guys a little bit about my Thursday. So if you guys aren't aware, I have class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I had a class on Tuesday, or Thursday, excuse me. And I woke up at 5 a.m. on Thursday. Because I'm a procrastinator and I was studying for a test that morning. So I studied for my test that morning, you know, and then I actually had a quiz at 8 a.m. and then I had my test at 9:15. So woke up at 5 just to study for the test, didn't even study for the quiz, went in for the quiz, took the quiz, then I went for the test, took the test. Then after that, I sort of had a little break, but I don't even remember what I did. I think I went out to eat with a friend or something. I don't remember what I did. But then I went back to class, right? And then I finished watching this movie in class, because we were watching a movie in class. Those days are the best. When you watch a movie in class, they're the greatest. But then after that, I had another break. And I went to the library, and for the class that I had a test, I had an essay due that day as well. Because everything is due on the same day as the test. He's one of those, so like everything in the unit is due the same day. So, of course, everyone does everything that day. And so, like me, I did everything that day. So, I hadn't started the essay yet. And it's like, I just got out of my class, it's like 2 o'clock. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm gonna start writing my essay. Because I was planning on writing it at night, but I was like, you know what? I'll be responsible today, and I'll actually start writing my essay out early. So I'm like, you know, sitting there writing my essay, and then I get a text. And my friend, if you guys follow me on Instagram, you probably already know this. But my friend was like, "Hey, have you seen Napoleon Dynamite?" And I'm like, that's such a, like, she hasn't texted me in like a long time. And I was like when I was a kid, and I don't remember it. And I was like, yeah, sure, what's up? And she's like, what are you doing tonight? I was like, I had a lot to do that night. I actually had a lot of things. So I had to finish the essay. And then I had to go record at my friend's house and then prepare some other things from Wednesday that I don't even want to get into. But anyways, I was like, I don't know. Well, what's up? And she's like, you want to go see the actor from Napoleon Dynamite and Pedro, like from the movie? And I was like, oh, heck yeah, let's go. But she was like, okay, we have to meet at 4:30. And I was like, we have to meet at 4:30? My class doesn't even freaking end until 4:45. How am I going to make it? She's like, you're going to have to skip. Can you skip? And I was like, heck yeah, this is a skippable offense. So I skipped. So I'm so glad I started working on that essay. So I was like, okay, I got to crank out this essay. I got to go to my friend's house, record something with him, run back home, shower, get dressed, all this other stuff, then go be there by 4:30. And it's like 2:40. So I'm like, okay, I've just got to write as fast as possible. So yeah, so I'm just cranking out this essay, and it was due by 11. It wasn't even due by midnight. It was due 11. So I cranked out the essay, and I look at the time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta get going. It's like 3:10. I run to my friend's house. We start recording it, and then it's like already 3:40, and from his house is about 20 minutes, and then I was gonna shower and stuff, and then I had to drive somewhere else, which was about 15 minutes away. So I really only had 15 minutes. And so I was like, okay, bro, I'm leaving my stuff here. Good luck recording. So I leave the stuff there, go back to my house, shower, go back to Eagles is where I had to meet the person. Then we drove to Athens, and then I got to meet Napoleon Dynamite, the actor, and then I got to meet Pedro as well. I got to vote for Pedro. It was awesome. And then we watched the movie. I ate some tater tots, and then because there's tater tots in the movie. You guys have seen the movie. There's tater tots, and then after that there was like a Q&A session, and someone who was in the movie who wasn't one of the extras was at the showing. He showed up. It was crazy, and he was like, "Hey, I was in the movie," and then they recognized him. It was really weird, but finally, and then after that, my boss called me. He's like, "Hey, you don't got to work tomorrow." And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's great news. Thank the Lord, because I was going to be home late. Get home, and then I go to sleep. Now, obviously, when I woke up at 5 a.m., I had absolutely no idea where my day was going to end up. That's this message. I have no idea where this is going. So let's get into it. So... all of that for nothing.
Prepared heart.
Yeah. That's my preparation for this message. We have no idea where this is going. It's 5 a.m. people. Let's get to midnight. So we're gonna be in Philippians 1:12, and I know that I had told you to share, but I was really contemplating on just stories because I didn't know what one word could summarize this message that I have for you guys. It's sort of, I don't know. It's sort of weird. All of our messages are unorthodox, like they're just weird messages in general. So thanks. I was like, all right, well, not weird, but like at least my messages are never like one I would it's more personal. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I'm presenting this to a huge crowd. I'm presenting it to you guys and whoever is watching, which is people who've been here. So it's a little more personal. But if you guys are not aware about Philippians, Paul is currently in jail. And he's encouraging the Philippians from jail. And, it's the encouraging letter or whatever. And it's really weird because Paul's in jail. But let's read from 12. So, Paul speaking, he says, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. He's getting passionate about it. So that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord, by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Now, the first point I have from all of this is that what happens to us happens for God. What happens to us happens for God. I know you guys have heard, well, everything happens for a reason. Well, of course, everything really does happen for a reason. But, telling someone in a moment of grief, or when everything in life is going bad, terrible move, don't do that. I tried it. I got slapped in the face. Anyways, but really, seriously, everything that happens to us happens for God. Paul was put into jail, and of course, who wants to be put in jail? Paul doesn't want to be put in jail. And as we know, Paul was going around and visiting churches and building up churches. He was a church planter, so being in jail was a terrible position. That's exactly where he did not want to be. And yet, as we see here, he says, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me, me going to jail, has really served to advance the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. So what happened to Paul happened for God because God was glorified in it. Everyone knew that he was in jail for Christ. Everyone knew it. Everyone knew it. And so what happened to Paul happened for God. What happens to us happens for God too. I know Clayton talked 2 weeks ago about seasons and seasons of life, and how I think you were coming out of that sort of, not the greatest season ever, but you're in a good season now. Sometimes it can be difficult to look at bad seasons of our life and think of what God has done, or look for God in those seasons. But even through the bad and through the good, when we're being blessed, of course, God is there, but even when it's bad, God is still working. Just because life is going bad doesn't mean God's non-existent. He's still just as there. He's just as much there as he is when we're blessed. And that's evident here. Even when Paul was in jail, the Lord was still working through it. That terrible season, what could have easily been like, man, I'm in jail, this sucks, I've got to be over here, I got to be visiting these people, I'm trying to plant a church over here. It could have been a terrible moment for him, and he could have not even written the letter to the Philippines. He didn't even have to be encouraging, and yet he was still using what had happened to him for God. He was still looking for God in a terrible season. And he wasn't sour. And we need to look for God in our circumstances. So I know I've shared this story with you guys before about my senior year. Heartbreak, it was the best friend and the girlfriend, whatever. But the reason why I share that story personally so much, well, one, it's funny. It's a pretty funny story. If you know all the details, just the story in general is like, gosh, that sucks. But the details are what makes it really funny. But more than that, I had made a lot of mistakes in the relationship, and a lot of those mistakes ended up biting me butt later in life, or later in that story. And the reason why I actually tell that terrible story so much is because of what God did with it. And he completely transformed my life with it. And now I'm so much more passionate for Christ. I've always felt a calling in my life in ministry. And I've always denied it. But after that was at the front. I was like, no, I really am supposed to be set apart for ministry. I want to pursue ministry, and if not, maybe this is leading me to a different point that God wants me to go. But all I know is I'm supposed to pursue this now, and I'm pursuing this now, to really be in ministry. And that's what helped me actually realize that. That's what helped me accept that. And so that's such a great moment in my life, and I got to actually share with people, and I got involved in a group. And that's why I share that story, because that terrible circumstance, something that people would look back at and be like, man, my last ex, man, it was terrible. A lot of times, God did something great with it, and we don't even acknowledge it. We don't even let God have the glory in our terrible circumstance because we're so caught up in how bad it was, we never realize how good it was for God. So we need to always know that what happens to us happens for God. And then my second point is our stories encourage others. So I'm going to pick up in verse 14. And most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Our attitude in suffering can encourage others. Paul's great attitude in the jail encouraged the others to speak more boldly about Christ throughout the area. Even though he was imprisoned for speaking about Christ, it still encouraged other people that, hey, even though he's in jail for speaking about Christ, I want to speak about Christ too. It still encouraged others. And whenever we share, encourage others to share, encourages them to be bold, to live for Christ, to be open to Christ, to learn about Christ, and just in general, it encourages them to Christ. When I think of stories, I think of this one story from Pastor Chad. You guys know Pastor Chad, right? He's gone now, but he was the kids pastor. There was this story where he broke his leg or something, and it wasn't going to heal for 8 weeks, or I don't know how long, but the circumstance was bad, and he actually was praying about it and was like, Lord, please heal my leg. Faster than what's expected. Please, Lord, heal my leg. And then they went back to the doctors, and they were like, hey, your leg's fixed miraculously. It's fixed. We don't know how, but it's fixed way before it was supposed to be. It's healed. And I always think of that story, and I think about prayer and about our relationship with God and how God can still do miracles. Even though we don't see it too often, God can still do miracles in our day. And that's such a great story. And that story encourages me to pray and to pray for others, even when they're hurting. Or maybe we don't think these miracles, like we say, the science and like medicine is the modern miracle. But God can still do miraculous things nowadays. Of course, medicine is great, but he can still do miraculous things like healing someone's leg when it shouldn't have been healed. And that story encourages me. And just like that story encourages me, our stories, not just our testimony, but stories that happen every other day, can encourage others. And that's why we need to share our story. Like Paul shared his story. He wrote out his story. And he shared the story with the Philippians. There's actually another passage I want to go to, Acts 9, which I'm sure everyone knows at this point. There it is. Acts 9. You guys will know Acts 9 the second you see it. It's about Paul it's Saul, I guess, at the time now. It's Saul being converted to Christ. But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for the letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, do you know the way? Men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. And then we know the story. He goes on to the road. He's blinded by the light. He has an encounter with Jesus, and then he's changed forever. But I actually want to continue past. So into verse 26. So now he's going before the disciples at this point. Let me give some context. He's been healed. He's no longer blind. He's proclaiming Jesus in the synagogues and stuff. And the disciples are terrified of him because he's the disciple murderer. He literally kills Christians. And then this is what happens in verse 26. And when he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord, who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. So Paul's story actually saved him in this circumstance because Barnabas knew of his story, and he was encouraged by his story. And he actually got to share the story with the disciples, saying, no, Paul is truly changed. Paul is truly changed. We can trust in Paul. He's not going to hurt us anymore. He's actually been changed by Christ. And that's a great example of how our story can transform lives around us. And as we know, Paul went on to transform and write most of the books in the New Testament. I mean, he's such a great Christian. We all strive to be like him. If only I could be Paul. A lot of people say that. Of course, we're all striving to be like Jesus. But a lot of people strive almost to be like Paul because he was just that great. He did so many great things, and his story is so powerful that it resonates with everyone. And so just like his story, I mean, imagine if he had been transformed and was like, all right, cool, now I'm going to go back home, I'm going to tell my family, but that's like about it. Imagine had he not shared his story. Imagine had he not been passionate about the gospel and went out to share. So many lives would not have been transformed. I'm sure probably we wouldn't be here had Paul not done that. Maybe, because he was the one leading, going out and planting churches. I know all the other disciples were doing it, but he was one of the ones at the forefront. He was one that people looked up to so much. He was so great, and he was sharing his story and encouraging others. Not just sharing the story when he was transformed, but just like you see with the Philippians, he was sharing about when he was in jail and he was still glorifying God. So our stories can encourage others, and we need to share them. And that's actually point 3. We need to share our stories. Our stories of seasons, our stories of traps and doubt from last week, of despair, and our stories of hope. And this can be more than just testimonies. I know it's really easy to, hey, I have a testimony. I can share it, which, nothing. I know you always say, oh, testimony, but, when we're sharing, like, I'm not saying like in a huge formal setting, because in a huge formal setting, testimony, if you just want to share a story, is the way to go. But in life that's happening, with friends or family, you can share stories other than just your testimony. Like, hey, this happened to me last week, and here's what God did through that situation. And I actually have some. So my story of Friday. So Thursday was great. Friday was not. Friday was terrible. So I woke up on Friday, and like I said earlier, my boss had called me the night before and was like, hey, you're off. And I was like, oh, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. So I wake up, it's like 10. My brother's in my room. And he was about to pull me out of my bed to wake me up because we had to go move my cousin. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to move him right now. I want to be home. It was supposed to be my day off, and I forgot that he was moving that day, and I wasn't going to be able to help because I was going to be working. And then I completely forgot, and I was like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll go help move him. So we go to help move him. It was just a headache. I could write a book on Friday, guys. But I'll go through it. So Friday, we get to the place. It's in Winder, so my house it's like 30 minutes from my house. That's his place, right? We shove this 8-foot couch into the back of our Suburban. It's hanging out. You know, we have to strap it down and stuff. We have to take it 30 minutes away to Lawrenceville. And there's another truck, a red truck, which had more stuff in it. We're driving. We're almost to their new spot, and then the red truck stops in the middle of the road, like they're at a stoplight, and then it won't go forward. And we were like, what the heck is happening? So that was already one of the problems that we started running into. It was out of coolant, so we had to go get some coolant. That thing was, that thing could have been so bad. But we caught it, like just in time. We're like, okay, it's out of coolant. We were literally, like, we could see the apartments. Like, that's how close we were. But we had to fix that. We got to the apartments. We get the key and stuff. Now we're in the apartment, and it smells just straight up like cigarettes. Like straight up, like someone was just in there for like 4 years, like nonstop smoking. So it's terrible. And on top of that, the model of the apartment wasn't even the model that they had agreed to. So that was just stupid in general. So now they have to go back, talk to the people, get a new model apartment or get a new apartment. So my brother and I had already run to the store earlier in the day to get more bungees for the trucks earlier. So now we're running around because they don't have space in the golf cart, running around to different apartments, and then finally, like an hour later, they settled on one, which is, the first apartment was on the first floor. This one's on the third floor. It's a story time, Nick. So now it's on the third floor. We have to carry this couch, 8-foot couch, all the way up the stairs. It was stupid. But then we get to the door, and it doesn't fit. It does not fit in the door. So it fits through the door, but like the door, it's like this is the wall, this is the door, and it's like you have to turn immediately left. So it does not fit in. We tried for like 30 minutes, it doesn't fit. So we have to take it all the way back down the stairs, figure out if we can actually return it, try to return it. That took 2 hours. Then we actually had to drive to Athens to return it, then drive back to Winder to get more stuff, back to Lawrenceville, unload more. Then my brother had to get to this practice, so we had to drive all the way to the practice. It was such a headache of a day. And then here was the ironic thing. The practice that my brother was going to was a worship service. So after this aggravating long day of just stupid comments, terrible things, everyone's complaining, everyone's aggravated, I end up in a worship service. And I was just sitting there, and I was just reflecting. I was like, man, I have sucked today. I'm like, I have just been complaining all day, frustrated. I've not even looked to God, and it's just so ironic. I end up in a worship service. I end up in their practice. And I just thought about it, and I was like, that's so weird, you know? But that's exactly what God had for me. For me to end up there and to reflect on what I had done wrong in the day. And realize that the different things that I could have done. Maybe I could have prayed. I didn't even do my quiet time that day. I could have actually been in the Word. I could have been encouraging the others. You know, hey, pray. You know, I know this is a frustrating situation, but pray. The Lord has something for you. The Lord has something in our bag. But I didn't even think about that day. It was just a mess. But I hope that story helps show that, you know, we need to be encouraged throughout the entire day, even when things are going wrong. To be looking to Christ. And then Saturday, it was a long weekend. It was a really long weekend, guys. But we need to share our stories, so I'm sharing some stories. Saturday, Had to go to this. Oh, I was even more frustrated on Friday because I had to go judge a debate the next day. I had to be in Doraville by 8. So I'm in Doraville. It's at 8. Get there. My car's like, my car. If you guys have seen my car, you know that thing can't go far. All right, that thing is like there's no speedometer. My seatbelt doesn't work. It leaks oil like crazy. It was just bad. And it's like freaking shaking on the highway. I'm like, just please get the Doraville. Please get the Doraville. Get the Doraville. It was actually, the debate went really well. So after that, went to Sugarloaf Mills to get myself ice cream. They ran out of my favorite ice cream. I was like, oh my gosh, please, Lord, please. So then I go to, this was a weird day. So just like my Wednesday, or no, my Thursday, I started off the day thinking I was just going to do the debate, and it turned into so much more. After my failed attempt at ice cream, I went to this tournament, FIFA tournament, the place where we hold the Smash tournament. Supporting the guy and stuff. Then I went to my friend's house, played some Melee, came back to the tournament. We went out to go eat food at Iron Age. I think I told you guys about Iron Age, right? We get to Iron Age, it's on fire. And it's not actually on fire, but like there was a huge fire in Iron Age. And we were supposed to get there 30 minutes earlier. If we had been there 30 minutes earlier, we would have been in the fire, probably. Who knows? But like there was like fire trucks like everywhere, and we were like, what the heck? There was a huge fire, and we missed it. That would have been so cool, but yeah, that place, place is closed down. We go across the street to another Korean barbecue that I didn't even know was there. That was even better than Iron Age. That's besides the fact. But then, hopefully my parents never see this. They really wanted me home by midnight. I didn't get home until like 2:10. It was so frustrating. Then I had to be awake, and I couldn't sleep till 3. I had to be awake at 6 for church. It was just like I had no idea when I'd be getting back home to lay my head on the ground or on my pillow, but I mean, I guess it took till 2. I guess it took till the next day. But for most of our cases, we always end up back home. I hope none of us ever leave and never come back home. But for most of us, and it will be for a long time, most of us will leave home and we'll come back home. And just like that day, it was a crazy day, and the Lord had ups and downs all day, but I still ended up back home. And we all have stories, seasons of life that we could share. Things like that day, how even at the Korean barbecue place, I started to actually share with them, and invite them to church, and it sort of looks like they might want to come, and that was a win for me all day. I was like, man, this was worth it. Me getting home at 2, me sleeping for like 3 hours, it was all worth it because I got to share with them and open up to them. But that's just another example of how our stories can be so transforming and encouraging to others. And if we just sit there with our stories, with our seasons, and we don't do anything with it, we don't look for God in it, they're just going to sit there and rot. Those things in life will have no value. It's sort of like wasted potential. Some of my teachers my senior year, as I think I've told you guys, I had 6 electives my senior year, and I had the best ever, like for my 7th class, it was the best ever class, it was forensic science. So a lot of my teachers, I was in IB, they were like they never said it, but I knew they knew it. I knew they thought it, that I was just a waste of potential. Because I had all these great grades, and I was like, cool, I'm going to do nothing my senior year. So I'm pretty sure all of them thought I was wasted potential, but I don't think they would think that anymore with the things I've done now. But it's because I've actually used all of the things that God has given me, and I've tried to use them for Him. If we take our stories, if we take our terrible seasons, if we take those traps that we fall into, if we take all these things and we do absolutely nothing with them, and we don't look for Christ in them like Paul did, they're going to sit there and they're going to be wasted potential. Things that could have been used for His glory, that we're using for our selfish pride, for our selfish gain almost. That we just want to sit there and be sad and be like, man, my life has been so bad, but the Lord has been doing so much good in that bad that we don't know and that we need to use for Him. So we need to share our stories, and of course, we need to share Christ. Matthew 28:19, the Great Commission, we need to share, go therefore, make disciples of all nations. Our stories can help do that. We don't always have to present, here's the gospel from A to Z. That happens a lot. It actually, when we went to go out and share, that actually can happen a lot. But a lot of times it's personal relationships with people. It's sharing stories. Hey, here's what happened to me Monday, and here's how the Lord actually transformed, or here's what the Lord did that day, and here's how He's glorified. And it seems really simple, and it is simple, but it can go a long way. Just like Paul shared his story and how people, the Lord is being glorified from him being in prison, our day-to-day life, what may seem boring and mundane to us, could be used for God. So share your stories. Share what happens to you. Share with people. Look for God in your situations because He is always there. He's always there. He will never leave us nor forsake us, and everything happens for Him. So if we look for Him in those situations, we can glorify Him and share those stories with others. So that's all I have for you guys today. One last thing. So I know, I know that our stories, I'm glad I wrote this. I know that it can sort of seem bland, like, hey, you know, my testimony is like, oh, I got saved by Christ and all this other stuff. And I told you guys how a lot of our days are just day by day we wake up in our bed and we're just trying to get back to bed. A lot of those stories, of course, they'll always end in God. And actually, I would say all of those stories will always end in God. But the interesting thing is how we ended up to God. Like I told you the story of, I ended up sitting Napoleon Dynamite on Thursday, I had a terrible day on Friday, and then I almost went to this burnt out place on Saturday. But I still ended up in my bed every single day. But all of those stories are drastically different. They're crazy wild, but they all still end up back in my bed. But they're entertaining stories in themselves. I still started at the same place and I still ended at the same place. It'll always end with God, but just because it ends with God doesn't mean it's an interesting story. What God did throughout the day is very, very interesting. And it can transform lives and encourage others, and it's situational. But I just wanted to share that last part. But yeah, that is all I have for you guys. Do you want me to pray? Or? Yeah? Alright. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much for this wonderful and up and down week that you've given me, Lord, and I pray for another great week for my friends, Lord, and for myself, and for everyone watching. I pray that you bless us, Lord, and remind us that even in those bad seasons, and even in the great seasons, that you're there, and that what happens to us happens for you, Lord, and that we need to share it with others and tell them how you transform our lives, not just in a large way, Lord, but in our everyday life. I thank you so much, Lord. I pray all this in your name. Amen.
Good job. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening to my week.
What was your Saturday like? I mean, your Sunday.
A Sunday?
Just mad.
Oh, actually, went home. It was a good day Sunday. Sunday was a good day. It was a slow day. It was nice.
Here we go.
Maybe something?
And.
Well, I went to go help my cousin